What if your food cravings aren't random? What if they are the result of invisible patterns that you've been running since childhood? On today's episode, I'm pulling back the curtain behind the 1,791 cravings profiles that I analyzed to reveal the real story behind the emotional eating psychological profile that has been blowing women's minds. And once you see your pattern, you are never going to unsee it. So let's go. I'm your host, Holly Bertone. I'm glad you're here with me today. Now, you may have heard me talk about the new emotional eating psychological profile. You may have even taken it already. Well, I've gotten so much great feedback from it, and thank you so much for that. But I keep hearing the same thing over and over again, and that is the results are scary accurate. And there's three reasons why. Number one is I analyzed 1,791 cravings profiles to create it. And number two, I'm constantly observing the patterns and the behaviors of my clients and my students and just people in general everywhere I go. And number three, I have literally been reverse engineering patterns since I was 10 years old. And you're going to hear that story in a minute. Well, today I'm going to pull back the curtain because I want to share the real story of how I crack the code on emotional eating patterns, how my crazy pieces of my childhood, my FBI background, and years of failed diet after diet, how everything just came together to create something I haven't seen in the industry. Now, I'm not saying that it's not out there. I'm just saying I haven't seen anyone else do it. In fact, I was talking to one of my peers in the industry about sharing this behind the scenes with you. And she asked me a solid question. She said, "Are you afraid that if you put all of this out there, that someone's going to copy you?" And my response was, I don't even care, because this is 40 plus years in the making. This is a very unique skill set. It's my obsession with patterns and pattern analysis. It's dealing with my own food monsters of over 40 years, my background as the FBI Chief of Staff for Counterintelligence, along with the brain science of neuroplasticity. I mean, who else do you know has that unique combination of personal experience and counterintelligence strategy and behavior science and decades of pattern recognition? And honestly, even if someone tried to replicate it, I mean, I'm me, them, they're them. Like, they can't replicate me. And more importantly than that, they have to live with their integrity. So yeah, good luck with that. So that all being said, this is a very unique methodology, and I am giving you that backstage tour of how it all happened. So let's go. It all started with a jigsaw puzzle, literally. You know what? Let's have story time here for a minute. Once upon a time, there was a little red curly-haired freckle-faced girl who was obsessed with jigsaw puzzles, and the bigger the better. And every day, she'd climb up on the dining room chair and she'd perch on the dining room chair, you know, that like half sitting, half standing thing that kids do. And she would piece together scenes of these puzzles of animals and oceans and skylines. But around age 10, something changed that ended up changing her life forever. And those 1,000-piece puzzles that she was putting together, well, they just became boring. One day, she had an idea. She dumped 3 different 1,000-piece puzzles onto the table. She mixed them up in this gigantic mess. And then piece by piece, she put them back together. And that little girl was in heaven. And because of that, she discovered a gift that most people overlook. This is an obsession with patterns. This is the ability to see connections, where most people only see chaos and confusion. And while most kids outgrow that kind of quirky curiosity, she never did. She didn't want to just solve the puzzles. She wanted to make them harder. She wanted to take what looked like chaos and figure out how to make sense of it, figure out how to put it back together. And she didn't know this back then, but this was the beginning of her obsession with patterns and the human behavior behind them. Now, fast forward a few years, and this small town, redheaded, freckle-faced girl She's now 17 years old. She's a high school senior, and she signed up for psychology class. And one day, she soaked up all the lessons. She was fascinated by what made people tick. And this was the human version of these puzzles that she still loved to put together. Well, one day, it was time to pick a research paper topic. And most kids, they chose the safe topics, the predictable topics. They picked the famous psychologist or Pavlov's dog or something like that. Well, for reasons that she still to this day can't explain, she wrote a behavioral profile of Charles Manson. She was 17 years old. Well, this school paper, it just completely changed the trajectory of her life. And you've got these other students, and they're writing their papers. And she's over here. She's mapping out criminal behavior patterns at 17 years old. And she wasn't just interested in what she did. She needed to know why. What was the root cause behind this behavior? What was driving it beneath the surface? And her teacher, and his name was Mr. Seiler, he could have and probably should have shut the topic down. But instead, he saw something in her. He saw a brain that was just wired to spot patterns in the middle of all the chaos. And he saw a gift for what others miss. And he told her that when she went off to college in the next year, she'd better major in psychology. And she did. Well, because of this high school teacher, because of this class, because of this paper, she discovered her path. She dreamed about working for the FBI someday. And this was even 3 years before Silence of the Lambs came out, and when that was really all the rage. It was 3 years before this. But the only problem? How on earth is a small town girl, years before the internet came out, supposed to figure out how to get from the middle of nowhere, central Pennsylvania, to somehow Washington, D.C. to work for the FBI? But through a series of twists and turns and life doing what life does best, she did end up working at the FBI, and it was a dream come true. I started my career in Quantico, and in case you're wondering, yes, I did run the obstacle course, the opening scenes of Silence of the Lambs. When I was working down there, that obstacle course was still there. And yes, I ran it on a weekly basis, like probably once or twice a week. It was so much fun. So anyway, so I was in project management, and I was a project manager, certified PMP, still am to this day. And this was back in 2004. The FBI, it was still catching up after 9/11. You remember 9/11, obviously, all the stuff that happened. Well, Congress published the 9/11 Commission Report and the WMD Commission Report. And it specifically called out things that the FBI needed to do. Well, because of the work that I was doing in Quantico, I worked down there for a few years, and then I got transferred up to headquarters to actually help implement some of these recommendations from the two commission reports. And if you also remember back then, the internet and databases, they were still pretty new. The agencies weren't talking to each other, which is what got us there in the first place. And the FBI actually had some pretty big blind spots internally with communications and efficiencies and all of those things. So what I did, the work that I did in project management at the FBI, when I got in Quantico and then when I got transferred up to headquarters, was that I took these disparate pieces of the FBI that the two commission reports had called out. And then I helped set up these national security divisions and units and offices that were specifically recommended by Congress. And because of the work that I did, they appointed me to the chief of staff for the counterintelligence program management office. And my office, we were a bunch of like super cool data nerds. And we looked at patterns, we looked at trends across all of counterintelligence. We analyzed the data and we sliced it and diced it. We sliced and diced that data every way possible. And this, again, before the big databases, before the big systems. So a lot of it was manual. And then we would give our threat analysis recommendations to the assistant directors so that they could make more informed decisions. And I mean, I literally thought this was the coolest job on the planet. I was in heaven. I loved going to work every day. I loved everything about it. I loved all the people I worked with. I had the most amazing team on the planet. And especially because I got to play with patterns on a daily basis. I mean, take me back to 10 years old. I mean, they always say when you're an adult, do what you loved to do when you were a child. But here's the thing though. God had bigger plans for me. And sometimes it takes being completely broken to get to where you are truly meant to be. And after dealing with breast cancer, after dealing with Hashimoto's, after dealing with some serious health issues, I resigned in 2017 and eventually became a health coach. Because after hitting rock bottom, I needed to go back to my roots. I needed to uncover the patterns of my own health because I wanted to get my health back. I mean, I never intended on coaching. I literally just became a health coach to heal myself, which I did. So fast forward now to current day. And I've been coaching women in midlife, and I keep noticing the same patterns. Is how their past experiences, how authority figures, how trauma, how belief systems, all of this has shaped how they behave under stress. And I'm talking specifically and especially with food patterns. But here's what's wild, is that the same patterns that I saw with spies and with espionage, they were the same patterns that I saw in my clients when it came to food and specifically emotional eating. And I always kind of joke the work that I did at the FBI and the work that I'm doing as an emotional eating coach, patterns are patterns and threats are threats. And that's all that we're doing. We are uncovering those patterns and we are staying ahead of and neutralizing the threats. Okay, here's where everything connects. The diet industry, it treats emotional eating like it is just a willpower problem or a knowledge problem or a discipline problem. Or if you eat more intuitively, everything's just going to be fixed. If you just do this, if you just have more willpower, if you just have more information, more discipline, more intuitive eating, you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be perfect. Well, no. And as I was working with high achieving women, I saw something that no one else was talking about. And that is that their struggles with food, they weren't about food at all. These struggles, they were rooted in habits and behaviors that have been ingrained for decades. And what I noticed is that most women, pretty much all women, they think it's about the food. So they're seeking out the wrong things to solve the problem. They think the problem is food. So what are they doing? They're getting the meal plan. They're getting the protein recipes. They're counting macros. They're getting this information. They think if I just have this information and then I just try harder, this diet thing's just going to automatically work. The cravings, the mindless snacking, it's just going to just constantly thinking about food. It's just going to magically disappear. If you're listening to me, I want you to think about what I just said. What do you think is going to actually solve your problem behind emotional eating and even the weight gain? Are those meal plans and recipes and protein recipes and macro charts and trying harder, are those things actually working? Or do you keep coming back to that same spot of frustration because you tried everything and nothing's working? And then you're like, oh, well, maybe it's my hormones. Well, if you're honest with yourself, you already know the answer. So do you think it's time to actually decode the patterns that got you here in the first place? And do you think that if you knew what these patterns are, it's going to be easier to create a game plan to tackle them? And if you're nodding your head, I want you to keep listening, because this is what I help you to do. And the first step is in this psychological profile, in the emotional eating psychological profile. This is where things get really juicy. All right. So let's pull back the curtain even more, because I really want you to experience this. Over the past few months, I gathered and analyzed 1,791 cravings profiles from high-achieving women just like you. And I took the same methods that I used in FBI counterintelligence, the pattern analysis, identifying trends and triggers, and I applied them to emotional eating. And this is a true behavioral analysis, because it's not about a label, it's not about a diagnosis. What we are doing, we are getting to the bottom with a personalized profile where you get to actually reveal those invisible forces driving your eating patterns. These are forces you've never been taught to see before. And what I did, again, did the same thing back in counterintelligence, is I sliced and diced that data every way I could think of, because I wanted to see what are the patterns that are emerging. I wanted to see how are these dots connecting. So the data that I analyzed, oh my goodness, where do I even begin? There's tons, and I'm sure I'm going to forget some. But we've got attachment theory, how early caregiver relationships shape coping mechanisms. We've got childhood survival patterns. We've got birth order dynamics, behavioral psychology, coping mechanisms, trauma responses, how personality types affect stress responses, the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses, saboteur patterns, plus all of just my general coaching data and observational data. And I pulled it all together. I sliced and diced everything. I looked at the patterns. And I created what no diet, no tracker, no therapist, no health practitioner has ever done before. At least I haven't seen. And for the first time ever, you are going to finally see the emotional eating patterns that have been secretly running the show for decades. So you might be wondering, okay, Holly, sounds kind of cool, but how does it work? What do I have to do? Well, the answer is simple. All you need to do, you take a 2-minute assessment, you answer a few questions, and then you are going to receive a personalized psychological profile with your results. And that profile, it includes a 20-minute in-depth training. And you're going to uncover your secret craving type. You're going to uncover those hidden emotional patterns behind your eating habits. You're going to be able to discover your number one emotional and stress eating trigger. You're going to uncover the 3 childhood patterns behind decades of food cravings. And more importantly, you're going to learn how to break the cycle and turn those old patterns into your superpower. And even more importantly than that, I am not going to leave you hanging. You're also going to learn what to finally do about this. This is the single most important assessment you're ever going to take, because your answers are going to expose the real reason that you reach for comfort food, which again has nothing to do with food at all. The overwhelming majority of responses that I got so far, the hundreds of answers that came in, and the individuals that were reaching out to me after they got their responses, they said the same thing. Things like, this is scary accurate. I get that one all the time. You describe me to a T. I actually feel like someone understands. You normalized my emotions. So I want you to imagine the next time a craving hits. Instead of it feeling so just automatic and obsessive, that you can actually stop it right in its tracks. And that's the power of what you get to uncover with this psychological profile. Because once you can finally see those patterns that are driving your eating behavior, that's when you stop feeling out of control. That's when you stop fearing food. You stop fearing the cravings. You start feeling confident. You start feeling confident and in charge of your choices again. And that's what I want for you. I want you to just like pull back the curtain. I want you to lift up the blind. I want you to finally see what is going on behind the scenes. And not with the psychological profile, but behind the scenes with yourself. We get so laser focused on the calories. We make food the morality police that if you're good or bad based on what you ate that day. And when that's the world that we surround ourselves with, and we're obsessing over food all day long, we can't look at the problem set clearly. We are too deep into it to see clearly. And what this emotional eating psychological profile does is it helps you to view the problem set from a higher perspective. You're looking at it from a higher vantage point. And it helps you to put on the detective hat. It helps you to stay in curiosity. And when we can approach solving a problem from that place of curiosity, the answers come so much faster. And if you haven't taken the psychological profile yet, go do it. Because this might be the first time that you truly understand why emotional eating has taken over and how you can finally gain control. So if you want it, and again, it's totally free, hit me up on Instagram at holly.bertone, Bertone. DM me the word profile, and I will send it over to you. Again, my gift to you, totally free. So with that, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode, and I'll see you next week.